Hello and welcome back to Podular Modcast. My name is Tim Held. This week we have Alma Laprida on the show. I became aware of I actually don't know how I became aware of Alma, but I ended up picking up her album, and I may butcher this pronunciation, Ensayos Baschet on Bandcamp, and I really love it. It's a great mixture of field recording and experimental. And that's about all I'll say about it. We're going to talk about this album quite a bit. And this was a really fun conversation despite the technical difficulties. I was recording it out in Ellensburg at my parents' house. The Wi-Fi wasn't great, and I think maybe Alma was having some issues with her Wi-Fi, so we stopped and started about 5 times. But despite all that, like I said, excellent conversation, and we are going to get into that in a moment. I first want to say thank you to everybody who supports PodMod on Patreon. That's how this show stays afloat. And the numbers on the Patreon just kind of hover. They're hovering at the same spot for a while. So I need to find ways to get more people to sign on. So if you have any ideas, let me know. But if you just want to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/PodularModcast. Want to take a moment to say thank you to Bastel for sending me the Basil. It's a delay, kind of spatially reverby sort of module, but it's really cool, super unique. I feel like Bastel is just killing it lately with the Basil, the Pizza, and the Aikido dynamic mixer. So I'm going to do a quick little demo of those, and I'm also going to use the New Systems Instruments tri-phase oscillator because I'm really digging that. I used to really rely on samplers and just recording, sounds into things like Morphogene or R-Bar or what have you. But lately I've been really digging making melodic music with sequencers. I think I can credit that to the tri-phase oscillator and the spherical wavetable navigator. I kind of got those around the same time and picked up a sequencer so I could really get into those, and really liking it. Okay, so let's take a deeper dive into the tri-phase oscillator from New Systems Instruments. I'm also going to be using the 4MS shaped dual envelope VCA and envelope VCA, as well as the dual looping delay. Also going to be using the Basil from Bastel, which is their new delay kind of reverby thing, as well as their Aikido dynamic and VCA mixer. Going to be using the ASQ1 from ALM Busy Circuits as the sequencer, and the source of uncertainty from Buchla and Tip Top for our modulation source. So if you look here, if you're watching the video, on the Mordax data, you see 4 identical waveforms, the green, blue, red, and yellow. Those are all from the 4 outputs that are the tri-phase oscillator. It is just one oscillator. However, the different outputs are for the different phases. So we have a phase 1 output, a phase 2 output, and a phase 3 output, and then a mix. So starting from the top, the green waveform is phase 1, and then on down the line till we get to the yellow, which is the mix output. So why don't we just listen to the phase 1 output really quick. So not much going on there. But if I manually turn this phase knob here, so that sounds pretty cool. Let's turn all 3 on. So I have them all basically at the same phase, but now if I just turn each one separately, but like most modules, we get our best outcome when we introduce some CV to the mix. So I'm going to put a bunch of different CV sources from the source of uncertainty. I'm going to get these phase potentiometers at different points and get their attenuverters also at different points, just so we can have maximum variation. So let's check out what this sounds like. And as I've mentioned before, I like to put a really fast LFO into the FM. So that's all three of the phase outputs separately, but this mix output adds an additional feature. So as you can see here on the right side of the module, we have this bipolar mixer, and this is what makes the mix output really fun. So we just heard all of our outputs, but they were not the mixed output, so this bipolar mixer is not going to affect it. So let's just take a listen to that. So now I've got phase 1 and phase 3 all the way up in the positive direction, and phase 2 all the way negative. So I'll just start switching those around. So with the bipolar mixer, the changes are subtle with this configuration that I have, but you can find your phase and then your CV going into each phase, and then the mix within that bipolar mixer. You can get pretty drastically different sounds, and that's one of my favorite things about it. So now why don't we just do all of them at the same time? I'm going to multiply the output from the mix and put it into an LPG, a dual LPG, and then trigger those at different times, and then run that into the basal. So actually, let's just listen to that on its own. Now I'm going to introduce the first phase output, and then I've got that going into the A input on the dual looping delay, which I'll turn up now. And now phase 2 going into the B input on the dual looping delay. And then the phase 3 output is just clean, going into its own channel. And that is why I like the triphase oscillator so much. It just sounds so good. And what I really like about it is, it's an analog module, and I rarely have to tune it once it's warmed up with, like, if I'm using like the Swan or something else that's digital. It does a great job staying in tune. So yeah, I love this thing. Go check them out. Let's check out Wounds, this week's feature artist. The track is called No Words When Silence Dissipates. There's also a really cool video of the performance of this on YouTube, which I'll throw a link to. But I'm going to play the track and show you some raccoon footage that I've collected over the past year. It's been fun to do this featured artist section and then just use a bunch of the footage, because I'm constantly filming things and I don't really use it for much, so it's cool to find a home for some of this footage. So yeah, let's check that out. Once again, this is Wounds. All right. Thank you so much to Wounds for submitting that track. Once again, there is a link in the show description to the video performance of that track. And if you'd like to be a featured artist, then hit me up on Instagram, email, or Discord. Send me a WAV file or a download code for your album on Bandcamp, and all of the appropriate links that you want me to share with the listeners. But yeah, this has been a fun segment to do, so thank you all for submitting your tracks. So I want to tell you about the Portland Synth Modular Expo that's coming up June 17th. So I'll be there. I'm going to facilitate a Q&A with Todd Barton after he does a talk that will become a podcast on Podmod. And then I'm also going to record an on-the-scene sort of episode. I'm going to have a table there, or I'll be walking around. So if you see me, come find me and scream something from the modular mountaintops. Once again, that's the Portland Synth Modular Expo, June 17th, and it is at Brick Studio on 209th Northwest 4th Avenue. Link in the show description. I'm in Ellensburg, Washington, recording at my parents' house, and now I'm in the backyard because my Wi-Fi was bad. And we were just getting to where you're from and where you are now, and why you're where you are now.
Yes, I am from Buenos Aires. I was actually born outside of Buenos Aires, a couple of hours away. But I have lived in the city of Buenos Aires, which is the capital of Argentina, in the South America, right? And I am currently in Bethesda, Maryland, very near to Washington, D.C., where I am living now. And I've been living here for the past 2 years.
Okay. And you were mentioning earlier that you moved to the United States before you had ever even visited the United States. That had
Yeah.
to be very nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Well, everything was really fast. I mean, we moved here with my husband because he was offered a much better job, and it was kind of a no-brainer. Still, you have to, right, to think about it a bit. And the thing is that they confirmed him, like they made him the formal job offer in near Christmas in December, and we had to be here in February. So
Oh my
we
God.
had to run so much and sell everything,
Yeah.
and well, sell, give away, I don't know, like, yeah, to friends, throw a lot of stuff, put stuff in storage places, or ask our friends, like, can you please take care of my books, please? Or can you please take care of this beautiful, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And we moved here with our cat, with our two cats. So yeah,
Oh my gosh.
it was really stressing. I was not that worried about not having been here because I
Uh-huh. Yeah,
didn't
there was too
think
much other stuff to worry about.
oh, yeah, yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
it was a lot.
Um, well, how are you liking it so far?
Well, at first it was kind of complicated because I had a culture shock when you're from
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in which there's people speaking other languages, and I don't know, everything. Uh, yeah, how you move in the supermarket, how you
Mm-hmm.
drive, like everything
Mm-hmm.
is different. Sometimes it's there small differences.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we were talking about the other day with my husband about how you have to turn the key to the other side to open the door, but you're, yeah,
It's
and
because
then
you're in a
and
different.
then
It's
was
you're in the southern hemisphere, right? Everything's backwards.
like the toilet water, like in
Yeah.
the Simpsons
Yeah.
episode, right? Um, yeah, and that was nerve wracking because at first we thought, oh no, this key is broken. It doesn't like it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and then yeah, and like, so there's so many small differences sometimes, and when you are just new and you just arrive, you really don't understand anything.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Anything.
mean, the
Um,
closest thing I have as far as that like experience goes is not even close at all because I just moved to a different state. But I did notice, well, it was strange the things that I started to realize about like my home state, my hometown, things that I never even know like consciously recognized until just small things were different here, and then it's like, oh, and it's weird. It made me appreciate my home more, but but while also appreciating the new place. So I imagine that has to be just
mhm.
exponentially impactful. Moving to a whole different country. And did you come up like you came up like right in the heat of the pandemic then, huh?
Yeah, well, it was 2021 already, but yes, everything was,
Okay.
yeah, restaurants were still weird. Uh, I met some people on the internet and they didn't want to go for a coffee. Nobody wanted to go for a coffee with anyone. So the first months, the first year, maybe, it was really lonely. Also,
Mm-hmm.
that was also that was also really sad. It was really lonely. Um, Luckily, I very soon got in contact with Rhizome, which is a magnificent place in DC where experimental musics of all kinds can flourish and can develop, and you can try out stuff. And so, a couple of months after I arrived, I could play for the first time there, and well, there was still only very few concerts and things to do, and people
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to go to concerts yet. Um, yeah, but yeah, it was like a lot of people moved in 2021, changed their lives. I think there was also that this idea of that we had been uh my husband and I in this very small apartment in Buenos Aires where um the isolation was very strict. There were the police would ask you, "Where are you going?" if you came out of your house. Yeah, so it was
Oh
very
wow.
very strict yeah, uh huh, yes, really, yes. You had to demonstrate that you lived nearby. You couldn't go further than I don't remember if it was like a kilometer or
Wow.
something like that, but you could only go out to go fetch groceries. That's
That
so you had
is,
to you had to be with your grocery bag. Um,
oh my God.
yes, so it was a
So
very
that,
hard. I like, yeah,
yeah, that must have been really like talk about a culture shock to come up here and then see all of the you know, I don't want to use pejorative terms, but certain factions of the United States population talking about the government infringing on their personal liberties and stuff, but there was nothing like that going on here. It was just, could you please wear a mask inside in the store? So that must have been kind of
I have,
crazy to see. Like,
yeah. Yeah, we have no idea how the isolation was here. Like we experienced a very
mm,
hard one. Sometimes we wouldn't go out of the house for like we planned going for groceries every 2 weeks, and
wow,
sometimes only one of us would go. So maybe you wouldn't step anything out of your house for a month, and that I think it was like a 4 month long isolation. No, it was terrible.
oh my gosh, that sounds
Yeah,
awful. So, but so it wasn't shut down by the time you got here, but there were still a lot of restrictions, and people were still playing it safe. And that's just such bad timing to move to a new place and then not have any sort of like friend network that you could at least form like little pods with it or something. But let's go back to Buenos Aires, and I want to get your backstory. And I always ask my guests the same question because it's always a different answer. Um, when did music first pique your interest, and then when did you make the transition from just loving music to wanting to be an active participant and make music?
Um, well, I think I there was not a starting point that I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because even when I was in the kindergarten, I would just like climb to a table and sing for all of my
I did the
yes,
same
like I
thing. I
would
had a little Fisher Price
perform.
radio with a microphone, and apparently I don't remember it, but apparently I just ran around singing 80s songs like Wang Chung and stuff.
Yeah, there were moments where I would maybe like get distracted from the idea of music. Like I would think maybe I would be a writer. Yeah, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to write these great books and they will be sold in the supermarkets. That was my idea, right? Like one of my ideas. There was a moment where I wanted to be a nun, like
Oh
because I
wow.
want to read and I want to be alone. I want anybody to bother me. It was another moment.
I
It
love
was
that
like,
it didn't have anything to do with the religious side. It was just because I want to read and be left alone.
you know,
Yeah, didn't you do a performance where dressed as a nun but with kiss makeup on?
yes, it did.
And I remember reading that, and then you said, "Sadly, there are no pictures," and I'm so bummed because that just is such a great image to imagine. I would love to have seen it.
Yeah. Also, when I think that when it's the first things you do, you're so excited about the idea that you're doing it and you don't register anything. Registering comes from like a more professionalized idea of art that you have to right. It was a time
Hmm.
where there were no social media and nothing of that. So you would let your friends know, send them an email, right? And
Yeah.
so I think this idea of registering everything uh, works works a lot right now because of
Hmm.
social media. Um, but yeah, it was a time when the performance ended and we were like, yeah, I wonder if anybody took a picture. Yeah.
There has to be a picture. I mean, I feel like I don't know. I feel like anybody with a camera on them who saw this happening had to. Like, I don't know how they wouldn't take a picture of it. But
Yeah, the thing is that I had like this veil on my face, and so the makeup, the kiss makeup, it was like a Gene Simmons makeup, right? With all this, you could barely see it. It was a transparent thing. So
oh, okay.
I don't know how much people could know about that. So who could realize that I was, yeah, and the performance was about. So I was hanging out a lot with these girls who were a lot into performance art. When I was doing my bachelor in arts management, so we had a lot of seminars and classes on contemporary art, and we were so into performance. It was like it's so cool, the body, the thing. And so they invited me to play there, but they were dressed up as dolls also, and they were. I mean, the topic of the performance was like the relationship, a toxic relationship between women that could be between women lovers, but also could be like a mother and daughter thing. And so it was quite dark and intense. And there were
Hmm.
aggressive moments between them. And I think that also maybe I wasn't that important. I mean, all this makeup and dressed like a nun, but like a white nun, like my dress was completely white, but it looked kind of like a nun, but with a veil, right? But what where they were doing something, yeah, it was like complete, very strong, very dramatic, intense, emotional, and I was just there.
That's amazing. Were you so going back to kind of early childhood and stuff? Are your parents um, like are they artists, musicians, or did you start with more mainstream stuff and then independently kind of gravitate towards more obscure performance art and that kind of thing?
Well, my mom is actually a hearing specialist. So the thing is
Okay.
that I always grew up with images of ears and
Interesting.
vocal cords, and there were,
Uh huh.
yes, and there were many books about that. And yes, so she would also, uh, her way of showing an affection, instead of hugging you, she would maybe like check if your ears were clean, right? So there was this thing there. Yes, yes, I had a weird mom. Like,
We all had weird
yes, and
moms.
so
Um,
yeah, yeah, it's that, right? Yeah, I'm a musician because I had a weird mom, and yeah, we would also play with some of her for instrumental, where we would check if our toys had their ears cleaned. For instance, it was
oh
like a
my God,
game
that's so
checking
funny.
the ears of our, yes. And then my dad, he's a civil engineer. So, and
Okay.
he's so much into math and physics, but also he loved music. Actually, my parents, they both met each other in music school before they left it to go on with their professional careers. Like,
Hmm.
um, my mom, she studied cello for a couple of
Okay.
years, and now play a string instrument. So, oh yeah, I'm kind of following there, like like a tradition maybe. Um, and my dad, he played oboe, and yeah, he
Oh,
played in an
nice.
orchestra. His first job was in an orchestra, and he also sold records door to door, right? When you go like knock, 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 hi.
Oh,
You
really?
interested in buying records? Here's the catalog. Yeah, he had a
My
catalog of
gosh,
records and he would sell them. So yeah, so there was
that
this
is so crazy
love
to
for
imagine
music
now.
there. Yes, it is. It is. Yes. But I think that they both thought that my love for music was something of my teenage years and that it would eventually go away and that I would be a professional like them. But I was
Hmm.
completely serious about this. And they sometimes they would freak out a lot about that because they were worried that I would be yeah, about being poor, about not, they told me you're not going to get any money, it's like doesn't work, you have to work of something else. That's why I studied arts
Hmm.
management. I was like, okay, maybe I can work in a museum or something.
Yeah, that's
So it was kind of complicated. Like there were
yeah,
moments in which I
definitely.
had to hide to study music, like to not tell them that I was studying.
Hmm.
And yes,
Hide your kiss makeup as you're
um,
walking out the door.
no, they do that in like when you get to the place, when you get to the venue, you do the makeup. Yeah, but, yeah, they were like, "Where are you going? It's Sunday morning," and I was like, "I have a rehearsal." Come on, can't you rest for a bit? Can't you be normal for a bit? Wait, rehearsal on a Sunday morning? I was like, "Yeah, I have a rehearsal."
Why are people
Yeah.
who aren't like
So yeah.
I feel like, well, people who I talk to on the show, they're either musicians or they're makers of instruments or they run labels, like basically I'm constantly talking to fellow, you know, um, enthusiasts, but more than that, it's like it's woven into the fabric of your being, and then there's the people who aren't like that, and there's no value judgment here. But why are they always asking us to relax and try to be normal? I don't feel like I'm not relaxed. You know, like this is what I like to do.
I don't know. I think everything has to do with like it's like for me music has to do with desire. It's not about being weird, being something, being part of a thing or not. It's more about something that I cannot help doing and that I've always wanted to do, and s- other life options sound so meh, like, right, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they don't bring that desire. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that some people would call me weird because I like to read, for instance, and things like that. I wouldn't care. I was like, you're missing something here. This book is great. So I don't care.
Yeah, totally. Um, so, what was your first instrument then, and what made you decide you wanted to play music? Was there a certain
My
artist
first
or
instrument was
song or?
oh, so my first instrument was the voice. I wanted to be a composer, and when I was small, I wanted to be like a pop singer, of course, uh, like Britney or whoever. I don't know. Um, and then I wanted to, so I decided I would learn instruments also. I started with guitar after no this voice thing. I learned kind of by myself, but I was kind of good in it, so I would always be singing um here and there. I'd sung in a jazz band, for instance, for many years. And then I started singing medieval music, like in an ensemble. But my formal studies, first I started with guitar, with popular guitar, rock music guitar. And then wanted to get real about my studies. I started in music school. And there, when I saw the repertoire for guitar, I thought that it was really boring. I didn't like it at all. And I picked piano. Yeah.
Okay.
And I picked piano, but I picked piano because in that music school, there were no singing lessons. Because when you have to teach singing in a classical music place, institution, and in the official institution with all the syllabi and stuff, and right, not a particular class that you make friends with your teacher and they teach you what you want.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that you also have to learn, they have to teach how to pronounce languages and other things that are related to voice training, because you are like training yourself to be like an opera singer, right? So maybe you have to sing in German and Italian and all that. So that's why I studied there for 5 years piano, classical
Oh
piano,
wow.
Beethoven, Chopin, uh, all of
Nice.
them,
Nice.
Mozart,
I
and then the boring
Yeah.
ones, Clementi, Clementi.
What's one of your favorite
Well, you know.
composers, especially for piano?
Well, now I'm back to Eric Satie, which is so simple and
Yeah.
yet so magical. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm going back to some of some Chopin studies also.
Mm-hmm.
I like Beethoven also. He had this character and he's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, I like
yeah.
how
No,
he
I
works.
actually I love Ode to Joy. Like I know that's been used in every commercial, and it's just overdone. But when that crescendos, it's really great. And So Satie, Chopin, and Liszt are like three of my favorites.
Mm.
Mostly because a close friend of mine who's also a collaborator is he actually he owns his own or runs his own piano tuning and restoration business, and he has two grand pianos in his house. One's in his bedroom, and then there's the wall to the living room, and then there's another grand piano on the other side of that wall. It's kind of ridiculous, but awesome. And we've made a couple albums. In the last one, we did a Chopin variation and a Schubert variation. Okay, so let's check out the basil. I've got it in a pretty standard setting here, but there are lots of different configurations. And yeah, we're not even going to scratch the surface today, but I want to show you some of my favorite features. So really quick, just a simple delay. So what's really cool is there's the delay mode, and I've got two different inputs going, but you can also get a stereo signal out of a mono. So I'm using both of the outputs from this 2LPG to go into both of the inputs on the basil, but you can also send a mono in to get some stereo effects, which is very cool. Actually, why don't we start there? Let's just do that really quick. Because there's all sorts of really cool stereo options you can do with the feedback, and then just as far as like spreading out the different types of time divisions for your delay. So yeah, I really like this negative direction in the feedback. You start getting some very cool, like a ping-pongy kind of feedback loops for your delay tails. And then you can further exacerbate that or make it crazier with the taps section. So here, your space slider. That is how you adjust your blur, filter, and taps. So let's just bring those taps down. And then in this space section is one of my favorites here. You got the blur. So let's actually just turn this all the way up, the wet signal. So with the combination of the blur and the filter, you can start getting into some kind of reverby territory here. So let's check out this filter. All the way up is like a high pass. And then all the way down, you can get a low pass. And then with the speed, this is really cool. We can just go to half speed with a push of a button. This control knob here, I'll just stop this for a second so you can hear what I'm saying. The control knob here, you can actually assign that with a long press of just about every button, and then there is a CV in for the blur, filter, or taps. So whatever one you have it set on, that CV is going to be changing the space slider here. However, I have it in the mode where you have it it affects all three, but while you're on this one, if I'm on blur, I can turn my space knob all the way down to here, and then the CV will react as if it's placed in that section, and then I can go to my filter and have it in a totally different position. So even though you're using one CV in, you can still get some pretty cool variation on those. And then one more thing here on the speed, you can press this range button, and it gets even slower. And then there's a lo-fi button. If you press and hold that, you can get this kind of it's basically there's an algorithm in here that takes care of the aliasing, and it's no longer doing that. So that's how we get this lo-fi sound. So you can get some really fun, like sparkly sparkles. And there's also a 1 volt per octave in for the delay. And then finally, there's a freeze. So that's pretty fun. But yeah, this thing's super fun, super versatile, and I'm still wrapping my head around it. And this demo's getting a little long, so I'll be back next week with some more new things that I like about it that I have yet to discover, because I'm going to play with it way more, for sure. I think I've said it, well, I know I've said it a number of times already, but I love the Aikido Dynamic VCA mixer as well. Absolutely essential in my kit. So yeah, big shout outs to Bastel for all of their amazing stuff they're doing lately. This week's episode is brought to you, as always, by Patchworks Seattle, and they have some exciting news. They have the new Korg ARP 2600 semi-modular synthesizer that has been modernized in the newest 2600M model with features like MIDI, a smaller form factor, and a re-engineered lush spring reverb, and that is available at Patchworks. And something else about Patchworks that I have utilized many times is it is a great place to bring in your vintage synthesizers and music gear on consignment, or you can do some trade for store credit. Patchworks is located in the heart of the Wallingford neighborhood in Seattle. You can stop by the showroom to play vintage synthesizers and shop new and used gear. Also has a ton of live events, from in-store showroom sessions with local artists to in-depth workshops and classes. And here's another cool piece of information. If you are shopping online at Patchworks, free shipping for orders over $75. And then one last thing, they are updating their showroom hours. So Patchworks will be now open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from noon to 7 p.m. and Sunday from noon to 6 p.m. So it will be closed Monday through Wednesday. Once again, that's patchworks.com, Patchwerks. This was a maybe a fortuitous thing that you had to move, because now I see your t-shirt. I have to show you some tattoos held. So instead of, I got my last name with the logo. And then I got the Unit 1 robot head, but then it got really infected, so you can't tell what it is. But that's supposed to be, for those listening or watching who don't know, we both like the same super nerdy anime.
Robot
One of the
anime.
best. Yeah, I mean, it's so much more than a robot anime, though. It's like clones of God robots that fight against God, who's trying to bring on the apocalypse. Like, that's good stuff.
Yeah, and heavy psychologic ideas and philosophy and etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that just blew my mind when I got into that one. I mean, because it's pretty old. It's from like the early mid-90s. I got into it around 2002 when I graduated high school. Um, Maybe I was
Yeah.
still in high school. And that's also what got me into classical music because they use so much Bach and Beethoven, and especially Bach, lots of Bach. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Bach is amazing. Yeah.
yeah, I don't really care for the harpsichord so much as an instrument, so I don't really like to listen to that stuff. But like everything else, I'm game for. Like uh, "Joy of Man's Desiring" is like one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, his choral
I know that's
works are
another like.
amazing, and organ works are also amazing
Hmm.
too. Yeah,
Yeah,
hard to play, really hard to play, really hard to
yeah, I
play.
bet.
Also, yeah. Every time we
um,
went to like a recital of my music school, we were like, let's see how many people get it wrong. Like make a mistake playing Bach, and we're like, I say one, I say three. So yeah, there was always at least one person making a mistake on Bach. It's so difficult. I made a mistake on Bach in one of my exams, and my teacher was so angry. And I was like, man, this is so hard. Come on.
It's- I feel like in that situation, the people who get angry at you for that mistake, they should just like, if they get angry at you, they should have to just do it as well and not make a mistake.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, lower my grades. I don't care. I cannot play perfect. Cannot do it.
Yeah.
So I don't care. It was like, yeah.
Speaking of playing perfect, are you familiar with Yuja Wang?
No.
Oh, really? She is the maybe one of the most amazing musicians I've ever seen play any instrument. She is just lightning fast and precise. She's like one of the biggest like musicians in the like classical world. I don't think she writes her own stuff. She always like does her like does other pieces, but I think she like kind of really broke into everyone's or into the scene with like a crazy fast flight of the bumblebee. Uh, yeah, you should check it out. She's pretty impressive.
Okay. Will do. I
Um,
think now that you mention it, I think that I've seen people recommending her, and well, I just have to browse.
yeah,
Yes,
I
there's
mean
so
it's
much good
definitely
music
yeah.
also.
Yeah, there's so much shit out there. But we're not here to talk about Yu Wang. We're here to talk about you. And okay, so you get in. So piano, you can play piano. You can play
I get
guitar.
into
You
piano.
can sing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but in those years that I'm learning piano, a lot of things start to happen like simultaneously. For instance, I start getting into the performance art scene while I am singing jazz in bars for some
Oh, cool.
money, while I'm also singing in this medieval music ensemble, which it actually all of those things are very important in, I think, in the music I make nowadays maybe. But so that moment it's where the simultaneously parallel projects and very diverse start appearing. And
Okay,
drop the music school when I learned that avant-garde exists, when I find out
that's what I was just
about
gonna
John
ask. Like, how did
Cage.
you find? Uh huh.
Yeah, about the Fluxus, which really I was like, hey, I like this. This is so neat. It's like, yeah. And so when I find them and I just go back really happy with this score of George Crumb, right? Prepared piano in my music school. And I tell my piano teacher, hey, I want to play this, man. He was like, oh no, we don't do that ugly music here. And I say, that's not ugly. He says, yes, it's ugly. We just try to do beautiful music here. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely there is a big faction in the classical, music world that just turn their nose up to anything but classical music. Um, and they speak with this like pompous sense of authority, on it. It's like, I don't know. Just because it has like a whole bunch of notes and it's really complicated doesn't mean it's better than the thing that has three notes and is rather simple but evokes, you know, deep, emotions and things, I don't know. It's Yeah, that's always been a little frustrating, but I imagine even more so for you, like being in that world and then, having your peers and your mentors, have that stance. That's got to be really frustrating.
Yeah, so I thought, well, I'm out of here. Bye. I was already starting to get into the improvising scene, right? I was like, with this through performance art, I started improvising. And the thing is that, well, I was playing the trumpet marine also, this instrument, this medieval instrument that I got from playing in this medieval ensemble. Um, right? This medieval ensemble, we used to play only with replicas of ancient instruments. So that already was opening like like an entire universe to me of well, instruments that nowadays would be can be considered weird, but they're really interesting, like the hurdy-gurdy. We had one, for instance, in the group. I didn't play that one, unluckily, but sometimes I could like grab it and play a bit and try it. And well, other scales, right? Scales that are not the majors and minor scales, and
Mm-hmm.
the things that,
Yeah.
right, medieval scales are like another deal. It's not a tonal system, it's a modal system in which um the way music and notes are structured mean like a different kind of language. And so you don't have, I don't know, you don't have the thirds, the minor and major thirds there. Actually, they're considered demonic in some periods of medieval,
Oh,
for some
really?
authors of.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, no,
That's
all the
amazing.
theology about music is crazy. But also,
Oh, that is
it was also
amazing.
interesting because, yeah, I was 6 years in that ensemble, and the thing was that we would not only play and maybe study, do seminars, get recordings, right, get albums, and then copying them from for the rest of the ensemble, for them to check maybe this song or this thing. But also, well, it meant for me also rehearsing in a place with no amps, which was a new thing. um
Mm-hmm.
it also meant a lot of new timbers, really new
Yeah.
timbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting used to working outside of harmony, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had studied a lot of harmony, and I was like, and I liked it, and suddenly was like, oh, you can do stuff outside of here.
Mm-hmm.
But also learning a lot of history and interesting things and funny stories, that some of them have nothing to do with the world how we understand it today, and some of them explain exactly a lot of things from our modern world. And so we'd
Uh-huh.
also had a lot of discussions about history and different things. We would have to
How
learn
did you
how to
find
pronounce,
Right.
yeah, how to
How
pronounce
did you find this
like
community?
languages.
Uh-huh. Was this outside of your
I found it in
academic
music
world or
school,
okay.
in the
Okay.
choir. I You had 3 years of like compulsory participation in a choir in music school. So one of yeah, of the students there, I just started talking to him, and he was like, "Yeah, I have this group, and we play medieval music, and the name is Decameron." I like, right, the Decameron. I was like, "Oh, I love that book," and he was like, "Oh, it's cool to find people who like medieval literature." And I was like, "Yeah," and so we
That's
started
yeah, like
talking, and
that's like finding somebody with a Neon Genesis Evangelion shirt. Maybe
yeah,
not quite as, but
exactly.
I
Yeah,
don't. I mean, I know it's
exactly.
not medieval. I just I wanted to get outside of my regular guitar playing habits. So I was just trying to find scales that I had never played or anything, and I found a Byzantine scale and ended up writing like 130 BPM, like a like angular, crunchy uh, punk song in with that scale, and it sounds really really weird and cool. Um, yeah, it's funny you
Yeah,
mentioned
I
like
had a recording, yeah, of Byzantine music that was like amazing. It was like, I wish we could do this.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah. It's funny like so my friend who I collaborate with before we met, he he didn't he didn't improvise. He said he didn't know how to improvise, but like I think a lot of if you're a musician and you say you don't know how to improvise, I think that's just like you haven't been brave enough to fail miserably for a while. um, so yeah, I've slowly got him into the world of ambient and experimental electronic music, and he has pulled me in. I've played guitar for years and years since I was 12. But now I'm just now starting to like get really interested in learning theory and stuff. So we're like meeting in the middle, and I think it's helping us both a lot. And um, yeah, I don't know. Something about your story really reminds me of that. It's. I also dated a girl for many years who played harp and piano. She was very good at both, and I always wanted to like jam with her, and she I don't know what that means. I don't do that, And it's just like I don't understand how you're so you're like such a better musician than I am, but you say you can't do that. It just never made sense to me. But it's yeah, there's
No,
such
it
different
does.
worlds.
I could not improvise with piano while I was in music school.
Hmm.
I could not improvise because, I mean, I had always improvised, like in my house. I was a kid,
Hmm.
and I had this Casio tone keyboard, and I would
Nice.
improvise on it when I didn't know any music theory or anything. I would just like found out that if you only play the black keys, it sounded good, for instance. So I would be like
Hmm.
jamming on them for a long time. And then so I thought I would be yeah, that I would be able to improvise because I was also singing jazz, and so improvisation with my voice was scatting, right? Was a regular thing, and but I could
Hmm.
not, because there's this way of learning classical music in which everything is so much under control, and you have to memorize everything. It's just a lot about
Hmm.
memory and where your finger is, and if you, for this note, with your finger 2, 3, or 4, right? Every finger has a
Hmm.
number, and
Hmm.
so that blocked my improvisation skills for that instrument. And then I started, there was a moment where I cheated on the music school, and I took some jazz, like piano jazz classes with another teacher.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, he was like, okay, you gotta improvise. And I was like, yeah, cool. And I could not. It was like my hand would already make a perfect chord every time I put it on the
Uh-huh.
piano. And he was like, "Okay, you have to
Uh-huh.
unlearn." And I was like, "What? What's going on? Why do I have this baggage that does not allow me to?" So it's not her fault. It's just some the music school.
Yeah, I mean, I understand more now that as I'm an adult and have met more people and from that world. And then when they like try to get, they'll like, when I say let's improvise, they say, well, you should learn how to read music, and I'm just like, nah, nah. So it's, I get it now. So the Trumpet Marine, I had never heard of this instrument before I found your album. Um, do you have it with you? Is it nearby? Like, is it small enough to
Oh, it's
bring
in the
to show to the kids?
basement. But where?
Oh,
But wait, because the Trumpet Marine is not the one that's in the album of Ensayos Baschet. It's not there. I am
oh, it's not. Okay, okay.
close to finish an album on Trumpet Marine. Yeah, no,
Oh,
that's another
nice.
adventure.
Okay.
I had too many adventures. Yeah, the thing of telling my story is very complicated because I had too many adventures. I played too many weird instruments and all that. But I can bring
Well, can you
my Trumpet
describe it
Marine
to
and
the
show it and
listener?
explain how it works.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, the Trumpet Marine is a medieval string instrument, which is the first weird thing because you'd say, oh, it's a trumpet. No, it's not a trumpet. It's a string instrument.
I know that's what I'm so
And
confused by that.
uh, it's very confusing. And why is it marine, right? Also, well, it
Yeah, yeah.
actually doesn't have only one name. Yeah, I know it's crazy. It yeah, medieval times. They're amazing. Um, Yeah, well, they're called the Dark Ages because there's a lot of information missing, right? It's like so many things you don't know where they're from, why are they called like that, like this instrument, and so it looks. If you look at the front of it, it looks like a triangle, like an isosceles triangle. It doesn't look like a cello, which is right. Maybe it's a cousin of the cello, um, or a cousin of a double bass, but it looks like a triangle. And they're very known for having one string only. It's like a monochord, right? That you play with a bow. Um, my instrument, my trumpet marine, has two strings, however, because um, this instrument doesn't have a standard. There's not a Stradivarius of the trumpet marine, like the
hmm
perfect ideal one that
hmm
sounds better than all of them. That does not exist. And so there's different sizes and numbers of strings for this instrument. Um, the most the most known is the one with one, but it can have, for instance, resonating strings in the inside.
Oh, cool. Wow,
Like
that's
inside of
awesome.
the box have some, yeah.
Uh huh.
I was offered, but the one that I have, I had it made by a luthier, and it's like a small version of a marine trumpet because some of them are really tall. I like can be like taller
Yeah.
than a person.
Uh huh.
And yeah, but mine is not that tall, and it has two strings also because I was playing this medieval ensemble, and that model was the one that the medieval ensembles of secular music in Argentina were playing, and so that's what everyone was doing. So I did that. I was like, I had that one decide custom made, let's say. The luthier asked me, what notes do you want the strings to be, right? When you touch them without putting your fingers, changing the note, let's say, right? So I was like, I want this
So,
and
is it a
this because
fretboard? Like,
those were the finales.
okay.
Well, the thing is that you have to play harmonics with it. You cannot
Oh, okay. So you're not
play it
pressing it
as a
down. You're
double
just
bass, for instance, that you, uh huh, you're just like slightly touching it so that you get these
like you do on the
harmonics.
12th fret of a guitar, the fifth and 12th fret of a guitar, kind
Uh
of like
huh.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Exactly. Uh-huh. Exactly. Yes. And another characteristic is that the bridge is um this small wooden shape on which the strings lie on, right? If you see the one of a violin, it's like a yeah, it's, it has the shape of a bridge.
Like
Exactly.
a little
It's like
bridge.
a semicircular thing, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's like symmetrical. If you look at the one of any string instruments, any modern string instruments has this symmetrical bridge. But the trumpet marine has an asymmetrical bridge, which causes also it causes that if you play the bow with certain strength, there is a vibration. The bridge vibrates and hits the wood of the instrument, and so there's like a little noise there, like a little distortion you can get from there.
That
So
sounds
yeah, so there's like those little things, those differences, um, that make for a different timbre, right? And also like an instrument that you don't really know, nobody really knows its origins. Um, it must have been very easy to build one also with this, given that you don't have to make these more complicated shapes. Then yeah.
right. Yeah. And
Hmm.
so, what string? I'm curious. What notes did you want? And is it something like that? Can you play, the Western, Western scales on it, or is it? I mean, is it is it harder to wrestle stuff like that out of it? Is it? Yeah. Like, what is? I guess what's its vibe? The kids would say.
You know that I cannot play Western scales on it. I cannot do do re mi. I cannot do that. Um, because of the harmonic things. But also, I've never really wanted to do it.
This week's episode of Podular Modcast is brought to you by Novation and their flagship synthesizer, the Summit. I've been using the Summit a lot to create samples to put into my stereo-triggered sampler from 4MS, as well as just playing keys. It is a lot of fun. It's super easy to use. It's very deep, but not at all intimidating, very navigable. It also has been very inspirational for me as far as writing new music. So, if you would like to check this out, please visit the show description and click the link. And once again, thank you to Novation for their support of Podular Modcast. I forgot what you were saying at the what you were kind of tying a bow on our discussion about your
Mhm.
album.
Yeah, I was saying that some people would have never released this record, would have
Mhm.
thought that this is just noise. And I also had to work very hard on the mix, so
Yeah.
that right
Yeah.
that it's
Hmm.
like I think I used three EQs, like a three
Hmm.
band, an eight band, and a 40 band.
I do that all the time with field recordings. Yeah.
Yeah, I am a great fan of EQing first.
Me
Like
too.
that's the thing that I use most. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's the
Yeah.
only thing that I use. Um, yes, and I love doing it also. It's so much fun mixing. But
I do too.
I would,
And EQing specifically, it's like the song is the piece of marble and the EQ is the hammer and chisel. That's how you give it the real shape and beauty, I think.
yeah. So that was like the thing that took more work of the thing.
Hmm.
Um, because yeah, it was like an album that self-recorded itself. I don't know, something like that, maybe. But
The
there was a lot
album
of
that
work
recorded
there.
itself.
Yeah, like, yeah. I accidentally recorded an album, but then yes, that was like a lot of work and listening and letting it sleep for a couple of days and then going back, and then letting sleep for a
Hmm.
week and then going back. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I got also so glad that it went out as a cassette, because that also like adds a little bit of another layer of noise, and another kind of mastering, right? Like another another layer. Um,
Hmm.
yes, yes, and I think that's all I can say about that work.
Well, I think there, yeah, I don't think there's I don't think we should talk about it anymore. I think the people out there listening should go straight to this album once they're done listening to this conversation and check it out. Yeah, because I actually I fell asleep to it last night, and I listened to it this morning while I was waking up, like just laying in bed. Because I so these field recordings I was telling you about that I make overnight, I don't really show them or don't use them for anything, and sometimes I like haven't even gone back and listened to a lot of them yet. But I listen to them as I'm falling asleep because my house is too quiet and I like to hear sounds of nature while I'm sleeping. But if I go to YouTube and get something, I never trust that it's real, and I
Hmm.
never trust that it's not on a loop because it's too pristine. It's like I want to hear the weird shit happening. I want to hear the imperfections, and I want to hear interesting stuff happening. So and I feel like it's almost more about the practice and the the process of doing it than it is about what I get out of it as far as material goes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the thing also with pristine sounds and sounding and mastering, and I don't know, instruments also, is that the person disappears there, right?
Hmm.
Apparently, right? It's there. It's the person. Someone took a lot of decisions there, but it apparently
Hmm.
disappears. And whenever I yeah, whenever I release something that's a little dirty, it's like saying, "Hey, I'm here." Hey,
Yeah, yeah,
I took
totally.
this
Yeah,
decision.
I've
It's like
always
here.
yeah, I've always fancied myself a lo-fi or a garage version of experimental or ambient music or something. But what about this new album? When does that come out? When do I get to hear this album?
I hope it maybe this year for sure. I have already like a first selection of tracks, but I will change a couple of them. But the idea
Hmm.
is already there. I did a lot of recordings last year in a residency in Florida, and in the Atlantic
Oh,
Center for the
cool.
Arts residency. They have a recording place. So I self engineered with the mics they have there, and I was getting into the recording studio for 3 weeks trying things until I found something. Was like the first week was like,
Nice.
yeah, this is pointless. And then I started finding something. The trumpet marine is the only instrument that I brought with me when I moved. I was playing lots of synthesizers and working with field recordings before moving here. And I found out that you can buy a synthesizer again, right? But not my trumpet
Yeah,
marine. So
yeah.
I brought it and I started
Right.
working with it. Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
awesome.
And also I started meeting all these people, and there's something amazing about being in the States, that is that improvisation is so important here, and it's so alive. The jazz tradition is so alive. It's not static, it's always changing. People still
Hmm.
keep on experimenting with things, and there's a lot of very passionate people doing things. And So I think this album is about this energy that I found by moving to the States, and uh, and integrating it in my work, with this instrument, with also my history, right? When you play in a medieval music ensemble and you play the trumpet marine, you also have always have to play the same note, like ba 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 ba. That's all. No other notes. No, you don't need to play a melody. No, no, no. Just you're like the bass of the of the ensemble, right? And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no modulations,
Uh,
nothing. It's like so. It's always the same note. And so there's
uh-huh.
something about that repetition. There's something about this cathartic improvisation that I find in the US. That's um, when I started improvising in avant garde. First, orchestras, like improvising orchestras and ensembles. The influence was more the European free improvisation scene, which is I don't know, which is different. But so it's been good to find this influence. I played here in 2021 in this first concert that I told you. I found Rhizome. I played there, and the guys that played after me were two drums, one how do you call this this Hindu harmonium. You know, that's the one that's like a box that you open and close. I don't remember the
Mm-hmm.
name.
Mm-hmm. I
There was
think that's
a
right.
double
Yeah.
bass and a person with a clarinet. So the thing is that it sounded like Terry Riley meets Coltrane. I was like, hey, I really need this to run through me and influence me. I need this to
Mm-hmm.
happen. Like, I need, yes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that I'm here and that I get to see all these people experimenting with different traditions, integrating
Uh-huh.
them, mixing them. And I need this energy to touch me and to make me invent something new. So this
Way to bring it
album
full
has no
circle. Nice work.
it feels like a full circle moment. Yeah, it feels like I am integrating like a lot of years practices and very different practices into a thing. It really feels like that because in Buenos Aires I wasn't playing the trumpet marine. I hadn't been for years. But it's very different to come back with the instrument with all the electronic music background, and now
Hmm.
with this influence, right? Of this
Yeah. Who
amazing
knows what would have happened if you would have
dance.
came up with synths, and not that, like you could be sitting here looking at your synths being like, mm, I'm I'm bored or whatever, like, I hate to be the everything happens for a reason person, but it sounds like it worked out at least.
Yes, it does. Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah, I was kind of bored with the synth. I was kind of bored. Like, if so, this is yeah. This feels for me. It feels great. Uh, yes, for me it feels great, and also some people when listen to what I do, they tell me, "Wow, that's very minimalistic." And I think, yeah, it's not about the minimalistic element that this album will have does not come from American minimalists like Philip Glass, uh, Terry Riley, etc., but from the electronic music. So there's also that, right? Yeah, I didn't even talk about the years that I studied electronic music, but well, now you know.
Well,
I've been, as I
I
told you, I've been
insist you
through a
come
lot of
back. Like,
places
let's.
exploring, and
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I was reading up on your like bio and stuff, I was just like, there's so much to talk about. I kind of already anticipated, um, you know. the you probably having to come back on again. But let's chat again sooner than later, and definitely around the time of this album release. And thank you so much for your time today. I want to give you the final word. What would you like to scream from the modular mountaintops?
Love for everyone.
I love it. Perfect. Thanks again. I can't wait to chat again.
Thank you. This was a great conversation. I'm so glad you invited me.
Likewise. This conversation, uh, technical difficulties aside, has flown by. I have 10,000 more questions to ask you. We're already approaching an hour. Um, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. I have a meeting at 12:45. So I want to make sure that we get to stuff that you want to talk about as well. I don't want you look back on this and say, I wish I would have been able to talk about this or that. But so I definitely want to give you that opportunity, but I also
Mhm.
I want to hear more. I want to hear as much as you want to tell me about your instrument. I lost you where you told me what notes you chose.
Ah, yeah, the notes are D and G because those were most of the finales of the medieval music ensemble we were playing with.
Okay,
And medieval music has 8 modes, and half of them have those notes at finales. So I thought, yeah, okay, this
perfect.
will
Yeah.
cover for a lot.
Uh huh.
um, Maybe you want to talk about this cassette that you liked.
Hmm.
That's also another weird instrument. I got the
Yeah,
pleasure to
yeah. I
play.
wanted to get into the field recording aspect because I am a huge field recording enthusiast and practitioner, and it's actually kind of perfect that I'm in this yard with all these birds and sounds. I was like, almost the perfect guest for this scenario. So,
Well, I've been practicing field recording for many years now. I started in 2009.
oh, okay,
I
cool.
traveled to Venice and I lived there for some months because I got an internship in a museum. And as soon as I got there and heard the bells, it was also a city without cars. It was like the paradise of field recorders, right? A city with no
Hmm.
cars. So I got a Zoom recorder and I started recording there. And it was great. Since then, I never stopped recording things, and especially when I travel.
Me too.
Um,
I have it.
yeah,
It's
it's amazing.
literally with me in my hand right now. um, I
Yeah.
record overnight. Anytime I'm in nature or here, I record overnight. And I actually got some raccoons being very vicious to each other a few weeks ago, right here on this porch that I'm sitting on.
That sounds great. That sounds
Hmm.
fun. Um, so, well, I have used field recordings in a lot of my records, and I have one record whose only field recordings of how do you call it, cable cars, and then well,
Of
in
what?
lots of tracks playing live. You know, cable cars. When you go to a place with mountains and you get into a cable car and you travel on them. So I found these weird noises in this trip I made in the south of Argentina, in the Patagonia, which is a very beautiful
I want
uh,
to go there so bad.
place with beautiful sceneries. Yeah, it's great. And well, I have this album. It's just drones of cable cars. And well, the thing is that I had to play this crystal Baschet, because there was this Argentine artist working at the Museum of Modern Art of Buenos Aires. He had this exhibition about contact, making contact with others, and talking in non, yeah, communicating without language. And so he contacted this workshop that makes these crystal baskets. These are the name of these instruments. These instruments are very beautiful instruments. The crystal baskets were invented in the 50s by these two brothers, the Baschet brothers in France. And it's this instrument that it has glass rods that you have to play. You have to wet your fingers and then softly touch these rods, and that's
Is
how
that
you
like a
make the
glass
instrument sound.
harmonica or whatever? Is that
Yeah, it's similar.
isn't
It's
that
similar, but
okay?
yeah, it has an amazing
But rather
shape.
than
Like the
spinning,
instrument
you're
also looks
moving.
so 50s.
Hmm.
Yes, yes. So he asked me, "Can you play them?" Like for my exhibition. He invited other artists too, and I was like, "Yeah, okay, I will." Yeah. And so then I find out that I have only 2 hours for rehearsals. I cannot
Oh my God!
use. I have nothing else. I have never seen that instrument before in my life. Of
So no
course, never
pressure.
touch one. Yeah. So it was like, okay, okay. So I'm calling here, invoking the gods and goddesses of improvisation. Please illuminate me, because yeah, it's not that I can compose a piece, memorize, rehearse it a lot, and then play it. Okay, so I gotta improvise, man. It's like no time except for improvise. So I have these 2 hours, two rehearsals of 1 hour. So I go, I start trying to play the instrument. I saw some videos on YouTube of people playing it. That was all my teaching, the teachings I had before playing them, right? It was like,
God.
okay, I see they do like this. I will try to copy that. And so I tried to figure it out with, for instance, the pressure of your fingers, if that changes the sound. If like I try to experiment and understand a bit, at least a basic of how you play this instrument, right? And I started recording these two rehearsals because I wanted to also, improvisation can be tricky. Sometimes you're like playing and
Hmm.
you think, ha, I'm doing so great. And then you hear a recording and it sounds so bad. And you think, oh, that was so lame, man. Yeah, that was
I
not
find
good.
that it's
And
always
other
that
times
way
you're
or the
like
other way around.
suffering. Yeah, sometimes you're suffering. You're like, oh no, you're playing really badly. I can't get anything good out of this. And then someone comes and tells you, wow, man, that was amazing.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
great. And you'll say, okay, maybe it wasn't that bad. So I started
Yeah,
recording the rehearsals, improvising with this instrument that I just started, knew how to play. And also, like, the notes are not displayed like in a piano. They're like very different. Like, they're not randomly placed, but if you never played it, you might feel that. So I was like, okay, yeah, no time to understand the logic, like to understand rationally the logic of this instrument. I just have to play it and learn by playing. And so I did those recordings to find out if what I was doing was good or not. And when I heard them and I heard all the sounds of the museum, I went there to rehearse when the museum was closed. But a closed museum doesn't mean that it's silent.
right.
It was
Yeah.
completely filled with kindergarten kids doing school visits. So I really liked how the sound of people in the museum sounded. So that's not added. That's actually the
That's
sound that
what
was
really,
there.
yeah, that's what drew me in to this album. Because I use field recordings in my stuff, and I want to continue exploring how I can do that. But just the reverb, the natural reverb in that space, and the literally the space that the listener not imagines, but like can like see with their mind's eye. It just feels so like, it feels like all these elements are so distant from each other. And that is just something that I've been really attracted to. I've actually had this idea. I want to buy, really long mic cables and get a bunch of microphones and actually mic like a full piece of property and then try to mix it, because you'd be hearing a place in a way you've never heard it before. Because if you're over here, you hear it from this aspect. But if I could record like a whole perimeter of a place and then find an interesting way to mix it, like, would that sound cool? And I feel like I had that idea, and then listening to your piece, I'm like, oh, this is kind of doing that thing that I was wanting to do, but probably with one mic. Or like, did you set up multiple
Yeah,
mics?
it
Or
was only this. Yeah, because my recording was just for myself. It was just for that, to understand if musically it was working or it was not. But then when I heard it, it was like, hey, I really like how this sounds. And a lot of people would think that, oh no, you should go to our studio and record the instrument. And I thought, no, this is beautiful. This is so beautiful.
that would be cool in its
Yeah,
own
most of
way,
the
but
time.
your record is special like that. It's a special piece. I really, really love it. And for these reasons that you're describing. And now I
Oh,
love it
thank
more
you. I think
now that I
that,
know that it wasn't planned to be an album.
yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I think the thing with field recordings is not about, well, it might be about technique. That's okay. Um, it's not always about equipment. I know that a good equipment can make a big difference, but I think that there's something about what you pick to share that's the important thing in field recordings, right? I have lots, lots of gigas of field recordings that I just keep.
Oh my
Sometimes I
god.
use them, I can process them, I might not. Sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
just like go through them and listen to them again, and no one else will hear them. That's
Mm-hmm.
fine. But I I think that yeah, that I did a good call in thinking about sharing this material.
Oh yeah.
Um
Yeah. I'm glad you did.
well, thank you.
Not only for the
I was
album,
really
but also
surprised.
because I probably wouldn't have met you and had this lovely conversation. So yeah, I mean, it worked out well for me.
Well, thank you so much. Yes.
All right, that's our episode. Thank you so much for coming back to Podular Modcast. Thank you to Alma for being a guest. Links to everything Alma Laprida in the show description. Also, thank you to 4MS, After Later Audio, Patchworks, and Ovation for their continued support of Podular Modcast. Don't forget to check out the new Systems Instruments Triphase Oscillator. Also, the Basil from Bastel and the Aikido Dynamic VCA Mixer. I'm telling you, if you have a small-ish setup and you like to play out live or go out in the woods like I do and play music, the dynamic mixer is clutch, as kids 10 years ago would say. Also, don't forget about the Synth Expo in Portland. Link to that in the show description if you want to come scream something from the modular mountaintops while I'm there doing the On the Scene pod mod episode, then I would love that. Thank you to this week's featured artist, Wounds. If you would like to be a featured artist on PodMod, reach out to me via email at podmodcast@gmail.com. Not Podular Modcast, just PodModcast. Or Instagram or Discord. Send me a WAV file or a DL code for a Bandcamp album, and I'll add you to the queue. And finally, if you would like to support Podular Modcast, please head over to patreon.com/Podular Modcast. I'd appreciate that dearly. Also, I want to point everybody in the direction of the fake movie trailer that I made starring the Coma Field Kit, where it maybe communicates with aliens or something. You know, it's up for interpretation. Yeah, that was a lot of fun to make, and I really want to make more films like that, and more short films, and it's hard to find the time. So once again, if you want to hit up that Patreon, you could help me make more films. This week's secret word is aperture. I don't know. Until next week.